and I'd like to introduce Ethan Akins. Ethan is the Senior Business Development Manager, Aerospace at the Performance Review Institute. Ethan has been working with the Nadcap program for 6 years, and prior to his current role, was a staff engineer for the Chemical Processing Task Group and established the first Article Inspection Task Group. Ethan has worked in the industry for over 20 years at various roles in the aerospace, automotive, medical manufacturing supply chain, and is an approved Nadcap auditor for the Chemical Processing Aerospace Quality System First Article Inspection Group. We're very lucky to have Ian here with us to go over Nadcap, and with that, Ethan, take it away.
Thank you, Stephen. And I'd like to say thank you to you and your team for inviting me to come to speak on this today. I've been doing a bunch of supplier symposias for the Nadcap program over the last 6 years or so. And some of the questions I get from suppliers and just the awareness of the program and how to get involved and what are the correct steps to take to be part of the program, there really wasn't material out there for that. So this is a great opportunity to sit down and talk about the program, the requirements, and how to get involved in the right resources and tools that are out there if you are interested in getting involved in the Nadcap program. I'd also like to say a big thanks to Mr. Diaz as well, talking about the ISO and the 9100 standards, because the Nadcap program really, it coincides with the 9100 quality accreditations extremely well. So the 9100, you have the high level quality, and what Nadcap does is critical processing. So he talked about the manufacturing process within the 9100 accreditations, and that's what the Nadcap program focuses on. It really focuses on those manufacturing processes, or what we call critical processes, and the oversight of those type of items. Let me see if I can get this going. There we go. So what I'm going to talk about today is really, I'm going to do a quick review of what the Nadcap program is, what Nadcap is, what is PRI, and what is our role in the program. We'll go over the organization of the Nadcap program and talk about the current commodities or the critical processes that the program involves. From there, we'll talk a little bit about the Nadcap audit process. And that's actually where I'll spend most of my time, is how to get involved in get a Nadcap audit scheduled, what to expect with the Nadcap audit, and how to prepare and successfully pass your Nadcap audit. And then I'll close up and talk a little bit about Nadcap statistics, globally as well as in the South Carolina region. So when we talk about the program summary, I threw together this slide really fast to talk about when Nadcap was first created. So it was first created in 1990 by aerospace original equipment manufacturers. And if you take a little look at the picture there on the left, you see, OEMs are going out and auditing suppliers, and suppliers are having multiple audits from the OEMs. So we have, I'll just use Boeing, Lockheed, and GE going into suppliers, and they're all doing their individual audits. So suppliers are getting 3 audits a year from their OEMs, typically on the same process, let it be a heat treat or a welding. And so they're coming in and covering the same material on those 3 audits. So what the Nadcap program was established for was to bring those OEMs to the table and work together to have one audit criteria and make it one audit for the supplier. So instead of spending 3 weeks for the supplier's time on the individual OEM audits, now we have one audit, 1 week, that covers those requirements that the OEMs then can review and look at and give the same value back to the OEMs. When the organization program was first created, it's recognized by the aviation oversight agencies. So you have the FAA there on the right, and the European Aviation Safety Agency there, and little call outs from their documentations that support the program. When Nadcap was first created, it's an acronym for the National Aerospace and Defense Contracts Accreditation Program. So a lot of times you'll see it in the all capital letters because that's how it was first created. But as the years have gone by and the program has grown, it's now an international aerospace and defense contractors accreditation program. When we look at statistics later on in the presentation, you'll see that the majority of audits and participants are in the American sector, followed by the European, and we do now have quite a few over in the Asian sector as well. But the program's been rebranded as Nadcap, as you see in the upper right corner there with the capital N and the lowercase ADCAP. My joke for that, and I always tell everybody my joke for that is I don't think Apple would enjoy us being called iNadcap. I'm pretty sure they have that branded. So that's the correct use of the name is capital N ADCAP. I have a lot of cheat sheets over here, so you have to pardon my sheets. So when we talk about Nadcap and PRI, there's always been a lot of confusion that, you know, Nadcap is PRI or PRI is Nadcap. And that's somewhat a misconception. So PRI is a not-for-profit organization that manages the Nadcap program. The Nadcap program is run by the OEMs. And when we look at the organization chart later, you'll see how that's set up. So what PRI does is we manage the program. We set up and manage the meetings and do the paperwork, conduct the audits. But the real group that manages and controls the program are the OEMs and the participants and stakeholders they send to support them in the program. We are part of the SAE group. So I'm sure many of you know SAE International and the standards writings that they do. Their office is actually right down the street from me right here. I can probably walk over to it. But we are part of the SAE International group. Recently, we did become ISO 9001 compliant. Because of PRI, we do have a registrar as part of the PRI programs and business units. It's really difficult to become ISO certified, but we are ISO 9001 compliant. Some of the other business units we have, other than just the certification body, we do have PRI training, which supports us and does training for the various Nadcap commodities and critical processes. We do have a qualification program as well for personnel qualifications in various industries. And we do have another program very similar to Nadcap, which is for aerospace and defense. We have a medical program called Medicred that is slowly building up and becoming more popular in the medical community. When we talk about PRI, we are a global organization. Like I said, we started off national in the American sector. We have grown to the European and the Asian sector as well. So if you look at the pictures there, you see our headquarters here in Pennsylvania. We do have two offices. The main office is in London in the UK, and then we have a Derby office, which we don't have the whole building. There's just, I think, one floor of that where we have some of our reviewers and staff there. And when you look at the Beijing and Nagoya, as good as those towers look, again, we have rented space in those, but we do have offices in both the Beijing and Nagoya area. So when we talk about Nadcap, it is an industry managed program. And this is kind of a unique program to say. I believe the Nadcap program and now the Medicap program are the only two industry managed programs within this type of industry globally. So what makes it a little different, it's experts from the industry and government that are collaborating to define the operational program requirements, establish requirements for critical manufacturing process accreditation, and then they accredit suppliers. So when we talk about experts from industry and government, we're talking about the prime OEMs sending representatives from their high-level qualities to collaborate and write and work on this program. When they're defining the operational program requirements, they are defining what the operating procedures are. As with most of your companies, I'm sure you have procedures that define how to plate something with nickel, or how to run an oven, or how to do a test in the oven or in the lab. So that's what the operational program requirements are. It's how the program runs. How do we schedule an audit? How do we respond to audit findings? How can you appeal an audit finding? Those are all operating procedures that they help write and define and are published within our system for the program. They establish the requirements for critical manufacturing process accreditation. So what that means is the audit criteria. When we go out for Nadcap and audit your facility for a critical process, we have a defined set of audit criteria and questions that the auditors are going to ask and what they're looking for. So those representatives from the OEM, work within the task group to write those audit criteria. And we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about the audit process. And finally, it's the accreditation of suppliers. So as Mr. D has talked earlier about 9100 and certification for quality certifications, with the Nadcap program, we do accreditations to their critical processes and various commodities. By doing this, it results in a standard approach to quality assurance and a decrease in redundant audits. Again, instead of having multiple OEMs coming in and do, the whole intent of the program was to have that one audit meet the needs of our main stakeholders, the subscribers, to give you that quality assurance. Especially with what's been going on with the pandemic, you know, having the 9100 audit and having these critical process audits are very key, because it's saying you have the system in place to produce that hardware, that critically safe hardware that goes on, you know, airplanes or military items. So having this in place is just really that risk aversion, as Mr. D has said, about risk-based thinking and that process approach. This really digs into that. And that's kind of like what the difference between the Nadcap audit is compared to your typical quality audit. When we talk about our stakeholders in the Nadcap program, right now, we're about 57 aviation, space, and defense OEMs and government agencies. They're all part of the program. So all the companies you see here, I'm sure most of them are very familiar to you, are all subscribing members of the program. So they send representatives that sit at the high level Nadcap Management Council and help make decisions and drive the program and the requirements within it. These are the companies that are looking at the audits and making sure that, you know, the NCRs and the issues being found are appropriate. They're using the eAuditNet and the QML programs to find suppliers to do additional work for them. I know we have a gentleman from Lockheed Martin who's a key participant within the program. I say right now 57, we constantly fluctuate 57, 58. I know right now I've been talking with the people from NASA, and there has been a greater interest in the space industry within the Nadcap program as well. So talking with, you know, Virgin Galactic, SpaceX, and what have you. So when we talk about industry managed program, it's really hard to explain. So what it is, I kind of threw this slide together to show like the difference between an industry controlled other party audit and an industry managed program audit. So when we look at the left for the ICOP there, that would be like your 9001, 9100, you know, audits, where the industry is developing the quality standard. Generally, you know, with 9100, we'll see the IAQG. So once they develop that standard, they approve the certification bodies that will go out and perform the audits and give the certification. From there, the certification bodies will go out, they'll conduct the audit, their auditor goes out, conducts the audit, they'll resolve all the findings within that audit with that supply base, and that certification body will then grant certification. Once they grant certification, that very bottom light blue, you see globally, people will have access to know that you have that certification. When you look at the Nadcap program for the industry managed program, PRI works with our subscribers to develop that critical process audit criteria. So that last slide, all of those company names, those individuals are working to develop that audit criteria. Once that audit criteria is developed, PRI will perform the audit. So what PRI does is we have a very stringent auditor staffing process with multiple levels of interviews that the stakeholders or the subscribers are involved in to finally approve the auditor to ensure that they are a critical process expert. So our auditors are going out, you know, are experts in what they're auditing with. Again, the subscribers are very involved in that process. Once the auditor goes out and conducts the audit, PRI technical experts review and resolve the audit findings. So that's what I did prior to what I'm doing now, working with chem processing, is I was an audit report reviewer. So I worked with the suppliers to resolve their audit findings, any of their NCRs, any of their issues, and get that audit back out to the task group for review. Again, the subscribers involved in the program have oversight of that. They can go out and observe audits and make sure the auditor is representing the commodity well, making sure that they're interpreting the audit criteria and their program requirements, and make sure that they are an expert in the field. While we're reviewing the audits, they also have access to review the audits in real time, so they can see what the NCRs and the direction that the responses are going to. And the next one there, the industry approves the audit and grants accreditation. When it comes down to it, once the audit's done and finished from the audit report reviewer, the subscribers are the ones that review the audit packages and grant accreditation. So PRI does the footwork for them, and then they can come back and look at the whole package. They can see exactly what NCRs are there and what the responses are and what the corrective actions that were put in place were to ensure that they're meeting what their industry and what their companies need. Once they grant accreditation, again, it's published on our aerospace QML. You get a nice little plaque, and again, it's accessible to all of them and anybody registered within the audit net. So if a company is looking to outsource, let's say, some heat treating work, and they need to use a accredited body for a heat treating audit, they can log into the QML and they can look up and say, oh, this company, Acme Heat Treating, down in South Carolina has accreditation. And so they can reach out to you and say, hey, I see you have accreditation. I know you have a high level of oversight. We're looking for someone to do work for us. So if you look at the two differences there, in the first, for the ICOP, the accreditation body conducts the audit and they resolve the finding. There's no involvement with the industry or the community. Within the Nadcap program, the subscribers can see every step of it. And that's why we have so much involvement in the program. The program has evolved to what it is. They like being able to see those NCRs and being involved in the program. Again, when we talk about PRI and what the stakeholders to the program provide, PRI does the technical experts that facilitate the program and the requirements. So we have 3 meetings a year, 3 conferences a year, where PRI plans the whole conferences, assembles it, runs it, manages it. We do the conducting of the audits, the review of the audit findings prior to the subscriber approval, where the stakeholders are doing the approval of the audit packages and granting the accreditation, observing the audits, and giving the oversight to make sure the program is meeting their needs. PRI manages all the industry approved technical auditors. So we do auditor recruiting. We do a very rigorous interview process, like I said. There's the application process. Most commodities have technical tests that candidates have to take to ensure they have the technical background and they can pass these tests. There's an interview with a staff engineer where they dig in deep into their knowledge of all the technical and the commodity specifics. And then the final step is the subscribers are part of an interview with the candidate where, again, they ask additional questions and ensure that they are technical experts and are good to support the program and represent them in their company. Like I said earlier, we do have 3 meetings a year where PRI facilitates a meeting. Our biggest meeting is in October in Pittsburgh every year, where we get about 1,600 people worldwide to attend. And that's really where a lot of great decisions and these requirements are made, is that in-person meeting. We've been doing virtual meetings for the last 2 years or so since the pandemic started. October of last year, 2021, was our first in-person meeting. And I want to say we had about 700 attendees, which I thought was pretty good as the pandemic was just starting to subside, but it was still there. February of 2022 was another virtual meeting, and our next meeting is June of 2022 in London. And that's going to be our first in-person meeting over there, and moving forward, that all of our meetings will be in person. And last, and I guess the most important thing about this is there is oversight of the program. So PRI does an internal audit for the program every year. Matter of fact, it's coming up. It's the first week of April. I am an internal auditor for the program as well, where we actually go through those operating procedures we talked about earlier, and we look at the audits and we ensure that we're following the policies that the Nadcap subscribers put in place for us. What the stakeholders then do is there's an oversight committee within the Nadcap program that they do an oversight audit of the program as well. So they take our internal audit package and they review that and make sure the things that we're finding and our corrective actions are adequate. but they're also digging into the program to make sure that the program is meeting and we are following the rules set up for the program. A lot of times when I talk to suppliers and we talk about audits, as soon as they tell them that I understand, because we have to audit ourselves as well, and we have an oversight audit from the subscribers, they laugh a little because it's the same thing. It's that criticalness of the program to make sure that you're following the rules. We are auditing suppliers to follow the rules of the aerospace industry, and those OEMs audit us to make sure we're following the rules they set for the program. So a little tidbit for you there. When we talk about the organization of the program, there's really 3 levels of the Nadcap program. We have the PRI Board of Directors, we have the Nadcap Management Council, and we have the Nadcap Task Groups. Typically involved in the program, the most work you're going to see is within the Nadcap Task Groups. So those are the critical process groups that are writing the requirements, reviewing the audit packages, ensuring the program is meeting the individual critical process needs. So I'm going to talk about each one of these a little bit, but not going to spend too much time on it. 10:26. Okay, gotta watch my time. So we look at the program organization. This is the PRI Board of Directors. It's generally the legal entities, fiduciary responsibilities. They set the policies and provide the vision. So when an Nadcap program is working on, let's say, a new commodity or a new area of growth, they have to get permission from the board of directors. That's really the prime job for them, is ensuring the program is meeting the needs and it's going in a proper direction. You will look at the PRI board of directors here. You'll see most of these are aerospace OEMs. We do have 2, Stryker there, and the Baxter Healthcare are from the Medicred program that also is part of PRI. And part of the board of directors are Jay Solomon, who's our COO, and Brian Trired, who is the Chief Financial Officer. They actually just met the other 2 days ago down in New Orleans to talk about program direction and returning back to this normal in person over the virtual process of the last 2 years. So when we talk about Nadcap program, the main body is the Nadcap Management Council, and you'll see NMC written a lot if you're looking through Nadcap programs or if you're hearing about decisions being made in the Nadcap program. They are generally the senior quality leaders and managers of the OEMs. So they oversee the operation of the Nadcap program. They establish and implement the policies and procedures. They do task group coordination and development. They identify, develop, and deploy improvement. They're ensuring consistency and the program is moving in a forward direction. Each subscriber can have a main and an alt NMC representative, and each task group can have a supplier NMC representative to represent the task group. So what that task group representative is for the supplier is that the task group send a supplier to the NMC meetings to ensure that task group's voice is being heard and that they can flow information back to the task group on a direction that the NMC is taking things. Some of the things that I can talk to you recently about from NMC decisions was with the pandemic of how are we going to handle accreditations to make sure that they don't lapse when we can't get into China or we can't get auditors into Canada, and set up a virtual auditing process and a process to do risk assessment surveys. So instead of being able to get there, you can submit a survey and nothing's really changed in your company, we can give you that extension so we're not getting those lapse rates. So that's the group that really manages everything at a high level. From there, we talk about the task groups, and this is really the biggest working group of the program. These are the subscriber and supplier technical experts, and they're the ones that are determining the requirements, developing the task group documents, the acceptance of the corrective actions, and are the final decisions on the accreditations. So whenever an audit occurs, these are the people that are reviewing those packages and ensuring that the corrective actions are correct. If you have a question about, I don't know, anodizing, and there's an issue with an anodizing spec, and there's questions with that, these are the people that are looking at that and trying to decide the direction to take it and how to handle it appropriately. A lot of these groups are working with the standard organizations, and they have individuals on those different committees working with those specifications and making sure that their company and Nadcap program requirements are being met. These are the individuals that are also on those auditor training or auditor interviews to ensure that you have a technical expert interviewing somebody who's supposed to be a technical expert. And these are the current commodities that we currently offer for Nadcap accreditations. They're referred to as critical processes. You can go through and see aerostructures assembly was one of the most recent ones. The program started off with chemical processing, non-destructive testing, and heat treating. Those are our three biggest commodities. But as you go through this and look, there are 23 current commodities. And each of those commodities then have a breakdown of the various technologies within it. I came from chem processing, so I can tell you within chem processing, there's 15 various smash sheets for the various processes covered by chem processing. And that would be similar for some of these other groups as well. Okay, so that's a brief little history of the program. I do want to spend most of my time talking about the typical Nadcap audit flow. If you look at this chart here, you can see it's a typical flow of, the supplier will register in eAuditNet. From there, they request the audit in our eAuditNet program. We'll schedule it, you'll prepare for the audit gets conducted. Then we'll take a look at the review process. From there, you get that certificate to say that you've been accredited, and then we schedule your next audit up. So what I did is I kind of broke each one of these steps down just to walk through and do a quick overview of how to prepare for an audit, how to register, and how to get into it. The biggest tool that we use with Nadcap and PRI is our platform called eAuditNet. It is a proprietary program that we've developed years ago. So before eAuditNet, when Nadcap was doing audits, everything was done paper-wise. So accreditation time would take maybe up to about a year from the time you had your audit to your accreditation, you actually got your certificate. When I talk about the 3 meetings, what the meetings used to be were the primes getting together with pallets of boxes of audit reports. And they would sit for 3 days locked in these rooms with lunches, reviewing audit reports and what have you. So eAuditNet really helped that process to expedite the audit process and accreditation. Registration to eAuditNet is absolutely free. So I tell people all the time, if you haven't done it, if you're interested in the program, first step is go in and register for eAuditNet. It gives you access to all the audit criteria, the requirements, and the program documents. Again, all absolutely free. So that's the first thing you want to do if you're interested in the program. When you go in there, again, with free registration, you have a screen similar to the one there on the left, where you can go up to your resources, hit the documents, and from there, those are all the free documents that you have access to when you register for the program. You can see the operating procedures there on the right. Those are the procedures I talked about earlier that define how the process and the program works. You have the scheduling process with 1104, the auditing process, when the auditor comes on site, how that's supposed to work is in 1105. 1106 is what happens when the auditor leaves your site and we start doing the review process. And you can continue down the list with that. Not only do you have the operating procedures, but you also have all the audit criteria. So if you click down on audit criteria, you can break each one of those commodities down and you have access to all of the audit criteria and copies of handbooks that go with those, which is guidance within the audit criteria. Again, that's all free access. You don't have to request an audit. You don't have to, sign up. There's no fee. As soon as you get registration into the eAuditNet program, you have access to all of this information. So once you register in the eAuditNet, the next thing to do would be to request an audit in eAuditNet. And what I did is I took 2 quick screenshots to show you what you can do. So the first thing is you could do an audit quotation. So if you go up into supplier applications for your company, there's an option that says supplier quotation. And you can go through there. It's a very step-by-step process where you select the program, select the commodities that you're interested in. Is it going to be a main satellite? Any of the other random information there laid out very easily, and they'll give you a quote on what an audit cost will be. Once you figure out if you want an audit, then there's the audit creation. Again, it's under supplier applications there, and it's very similar. You go into audit program, select Nadcap, select the commodities you're requesting the audit for, and this will start you on the path to getting the audit scheduled. Once you do that, eAuditNet registers it, it goes up to our scheduling department, and those are the people that are going to look to start scheduling your audit. Now, for initials are generally hand scheduled, so our schedulers are looking at it making sure it's fitting in the quarter or area time period that you want it to be scheduled in. We have the appropriate auditor. Do they need to be ITAR compliant? Are they do they travel to that area? Or they have the qualifications to perform that audit? So there's a lot that goes into the scheduling. Typically, we do greater than 5,000 audits. Even with the COVID pandemic that went on, I want to say we did about 4,100. So we do a lot of audits globally across the commodities. eAudit does have a functionality that does some batch scheduling, where it does take a lot of that off the scheduler, so it will automatically schedule the audit with the right needs. There's always those questions asked from suppliers. So what if I don't like my audit date? What if this doesn't work for me? What if I have a question about this or an issue with that? I tell people all the time, the best thing to do is contact the scheduling department. I put their email address up there, and we'll talk about contact later in this as well. But we have a great team there that are working very hard, especially with this pandemic, to try to get those audit dates to work best for the suppliers and get those audits on the schedule and rearrange our schedule as we can. They're very busy people, so it's a department I try to stay out of right now. I talked earlier, took a little screenshot here to show you that we do have 284 auditors globally. And you can see most of them are primarily focused in the Americas, followed by Europe. And then we have a bunch scattered throughout the Asia ones. They're all commodity specific approved, subject matter experts approved by the industries, but managed by PRI. So now that you scheduled your audit, the next thing you're going to do is you want to start preparing for your audit. Now, remember I told you once you registered for eAudit.net, you have free access to this information. So I would hope that you'd start looking at it before you go ahead and start scheduling it. But if not, now's the time to go in there, download your audit criteria, take a look at the audit handbooks that are there. Each commodity will also put up auditor advisories and top NCRs from the prior years. All great tools to be looking at and preparing for your audit. As I spoke earlier about doing supplier events, that these are a lot of those tools that I tell people about, especially newer suppliers coming in the program, that they're just not aware that this information is there. An Nadcap audit is an open book test. You shouldn't be surprised when an auditor comes on site and asks you a question. You have the criteria they're coming in there for, and you have the handbook, which gives clarification and requirements, and you have some prior NCRs to show where auditors are typically finding issues within those areas. So there's a lot of good information there. When I talk about audit preparation, we require a self-audit for the Nadcap program. So within 30 days of your audit start date, there's a requirement that you have to submit a completed audit criteria that you've done yourself. I tell people all the time, when you're doing your internal audits, include the audit criteria in your internal audit. It's great material. It's a great cheat sheet, so to say, of auditing your special processes and your critical processes. So when you're doing that self-audit to the audit criteria, you want to involve the right people. And I always say when you're auditing, make a team. Don't stand on your own, because there's a lot to do with this audit. You know, have your quality engineers, your processing techs, your inspectors, get them involved in the process, because they might see some things that you might not typically see when you're out doing a typical internal audit. When you're doing your self-audit, use those external documents I just talked about. You know, you're going to use the Nadcap audit criteria, the handbooks, look at the auditor advisories, look at the Nadcap presentations, the top 10 NCRs. There's a lot of material within eAudit.net that can help support you, so you're not just standing there, you know, on an island by yourself trying to figure out, well, I'm not sure what this means, you know? When you're doing your self-audit, make sure you're going through and you're looking at your internal documents. You want all your work instructions, your forms, your process flows, training records, procedures. I mean, there's a lot there. Typically, this will already be in your internal audit that you're doing for your quality accreditation. But again, incorporate them together and it makes the process a lot easier. When you're doing your self-audit, you're going to be looking at your equipment. You're going to be looking at your inspection equipment to ensure calibration and tolerances and its meeting requirements. You're going to go out there and look at your processing lines to ensure that they're clean and they're tagged properly and they're following the process that you're defining in your work instructions. Ovens, when it comes to heat treating is all ovens. Do you have the proper calibrations to meet what your customers want? Are you doing the TUSs and SATs? So it's all stuff that should be part of your audit preparation. Get out on the floor and actually do the audit and look at things. When I was an audit report reviewer there, that was one of the biggest things I would talk to suppliers about is, when you did your self-audit, did you sit in your office and go through and do it, or did you actually go check on things? And that's, it sounds silly, but it's critical to avoid a lot of these little minor NCRs of going out there and actually looking at it and just saying, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's in place. So the big day, everyone's always excited, nervous. I mean, operators are always nervous to be audited, especially if they've never been audited before. So the big days, the audit comes and we're ready to come out there and audit you. One of our auditors come out to do it. Let me make sure I got my notes in this so don't forget anything. So when we go out there, the auditor's going to come on site. Prior to coming on site, he's going to contact you. Typically, it's like, I think it's 3 weeks ahead of time. And that's to put the audit plan together. So it's, hey, I'm coming out on this date. Here's my audit plan on day 1. I want to do this, 2 this, 3 this. We'll close up and then, I'll leave the facility. The auditor will always start every meeting with a opening presentation of why he's there. So it's, I'm here to conduct a chem processing audit, and this is what the scope of the audit is, and this is what I plan on doing. Today, we'll do a quick tour of the facility, but I want to start with these records and then move into job audits. The core of all the Nadcap audits are the job audits. That's going on the floor and looking at the actual processes. I did some screenshots here of the audit criteria and some actual screenshots here of what eAuditNet looks like for job audits, where you can see the questions. And I guess I cut off the yes, no's, but there's yes, no's and NCR marks here where the auditor's filling out the checklist. The Nadcap audit officially starts whenever they do scope verification with the auditee. So when he's done with his opening meeting, what they do is they verify the scope of the audit with the auditee in eAuditNet. So the auditee will log in, they review the scope to make sure it is what the audit is and the correct items are there, and they verify it and the auditor verifies it as well. And that's when the audit officially starts. After that, the auditor is going to go break off and start doing his agenda, what he wants to look at. Every day he'll do a closeout meeting every day, talking about the status of where the audit is, what he's seen, maybe saying, I need some additional information here, so the auditee can go find some additional information if need be. Every day then he'll start with an opening meeting again and a closing meeting. The last day of the audit, he'll do an official closeout meeting where he'll review the Nadcap process. What are the next steps? How does the audit review process go? Here are the non-conformances that I found, and he'll state them out there. And again, if you have any questions or if you have any concerns, or if you have any questions about the validity of the NCRs, we'll go through that process of contacting the reviewer and the process and the steps of that. Once the auditor leaves your facility, he has 3 business days to submit the report. So he'll leave the facility, travel back to his house typically, and finish writing up the report, completing this checklist, typing what he has to do, make sure the wording for the NCRs is correct. And then that's going to get uploaded into eAuditNet and assigned to an audit report reviewer. During the audit, he's looking at, he's going to look at your quality cert to make sure you have a valid quality cert. He's going to be looking at training records. I should say he or she will be looking at training records of your operators and your inspectors to make sure you're following your procedures and your processes and people are trained to do what they're, technically doing. Again, a lot of times with calibration of equipment, standards, it really then comes down to those job audits and watching those critical processes. So once the audit's performed and the auditor submits the report in eAuditNet, then it comes back here to PRI, and that's where we start doing the audit review process. So that's taking a look at the audit and working any of the NCRs that were found on the audit. So audit report reviewers are assigned when the auditor submits it to eAuditNet. On the main page of your audit package in eAuditNet, their name will be in the upper right, and it's a hyperlink so you can click on it and get all their confirmation. Reviewers do an initial review of the audit packages to make sure there's no export control material there, and if so, they will remove it and edit it appropriately. and then it's submitted back to the auditee to start their first round responses. So the auditee has 21 days for their first round responses to address the NCRs. In Nadcap, NCRs are addressed through root cause corrective action, RCCA processes. And you see in that top box there, that's the 6 items that are going to be addressed on every NCR. We want the immediate corrective action. Then we want what you assume or what you investigated to find to be the root cause, the impact of all the root cause. And a lot of people falter with impact because they'll just say no impact. And I'll tell you, unless it's a very minor NCR, you should always have something to support why there's no impact. That's a key thing that will kick the audit back to you for another cycle, is if you do a very short, small answer of just no impact. Why is there no impact? After that is the action taken to prevent recurrence. Are you changing your procedures? Have you retrained your staff? And then E then will be the objective evidence to support the action taken to prevent recurrence. And finally, then it's the effectivity date. We understand, the subscribers understand, some changes just can't happen overnight. So with the current systems out there, if it's going to take a while to get that process in place, put down the effectivity date. If it's going to be a month, say it's a month. I mean, we can still close the NCRs in the audit package before that date if you have the proper evidence and the actions taken to prevent recurrence stated and listed there. We do have a process for submitting ITAR or export controlled information. You can see the hyperlink there in that middle box. It talks about how to respond to an NCR and root cause corrective action tutorial. And within that, there's some documentation that says how to submit ITAR information that cannot be put in the eAuditNet program. And that's by submitting the materials to that email address you see on the screen there, that restricteddata@p-r-i.org. I will tell you it's a very secure site. As a reviewer, it was always a pain in my butt. I can honestly say that, because it's one of those screens that, you know, you have limited time in it. It blurs it out. It's very uneditable on my side. You can't really zoom in. You can't change it. It is an extremely secure site to be able to review information in regards to the audit. Again, within those 2 hyperlinks, there's also some tools to help with responses. And then the typical time frame for responses, which is defined in the operating procedure 1106, talks about 21 days for the first cycle. After the first cycle response, you'll submit it to the reviewer. The reviewer then will take a look at it. If they have any additional questions, they'll send it back to you again. After that, you only have 7 days for each cycle response. Per procedure, we're supposed to close everything within 4 cycles. There is an allowance to do an additional 2 cycle if we're on that 4th cycle and it's just a couple little things that need to be done left. We can extend it for an additional 2 cycles. There are late days with each one of these audit packages as well. So just because it says 21 and 7, you are permitted up to 30 days of late time as well. So cumulative over the one audit package would be 30 late days would be allowed to for responses. The final thing about working the audit, once the reviewer works with you and we close out the NCRs, there is an auditee feedback. And that's what that last picture there is at the bottom. And that's getting your feedback of how the audit was conducted. Did the auditor show up every day on site? Was he very vocal? Did he have an opening meeting? Was it effective? Did he explain the NCRs? And it's very crucial that you give us honest feedback within that feedback so that we can take the proper action to make sure the program is meeting the needs of not only the suppliers, but the subscribers as well. The final question on that is, are we allowed to share the information with the auditor or not? We've had some people have that concern that they're afraid of sharing it with the auditor, that there might be some type of repercussion, or maybe he'll talk to other auditors. So we do take it very seriously, and we will not share that information with the auditor. We will take it internally here at PRI, work with the task group members, and see how to address that auditor to make sure that he's meeting their needs. If he is not meeting the needs of the suppliers and the subscribers, you know, we will let the auditor go. And the only way we can get that feedback is by you guys being, you know, very honest within that feedback. Again, typical review of it. We have the supplier review when you do the root cause corrective action, the audit report reviewer. So we're the task group approved technical expert, and we're reviewing those responses. Every task group reviewer goes through 2 phases. First, we're non-delegated, which means that the audit report reviewer reviews the audit packages, and the task group has to review. We have to have a quorum that approves every audit package that they review. After a period of, I believe, a year, minimum of 10 audits, and some other criteria, the audit report reviewer can then be delegated, in which case the task group member said, yep, you've been reviewing this. We have faith in you and your responses, and you're meeting our requirements, that we don't need that delegation or that free quorum for the task group review. I will tell you honestly that most of the time it's not an issue getting delegation on audit criteria or audit reports when it's a task group review. So with the 2 arrows, you see most of the work is done between the supplier review and the SE review. Once the SE or the reviewer is acceptable and they accepted all the NCRs and closed them off, it goes back to the task group review. And those are the subscriber members of the task groups, which are the technical experts. And they're the ones looking at it and ensuring that, yep, those NCRs are good. This supplier is doing a good job. They have proper system in place, and those are the people that are granting their accreditation. So once that goes through, PRI will issue the certificate to the supplier and grant accreditation for the commodity. It's a little blurry, but that's a good example of what the certificate looks like. As an initial, you'll get a nice little welcome package. You'll get a plaque. You'll get the certificate so you can hang it up on the wall and proudly display it. I have a nice little slide here. The big thing is once you pass it, congratulate your team. You know, the Nadcap audit can be kind of frustrating. You see the little picture there on the left of what the audit actually looks like, and it is. It can be a difficult time. And once you pass that audit, throw it on your social media, put it on your website that you are now a Nadcap accredited company. There's a package that comes with logos. It shows you how to do with your logo, put it on your business cards. As I've been traveling to more conferences, I'm always happy to see suppliers and their booths and having the Nadcap logo up there. And I sit there and I try to take a picture with them, and I put them up on my own personal LinkedIn because it's nice to see that stuff. It's hard work and it means a lot. Not only this, then you go on that aerospace QML I talked about as well, which is part of eAudit.net, which lists your company, your capabilities, and says that you have that accreditation. And that's pretty much the typical Nadcap flow. Once you get your certificate for that initial audit, eAudit.net will automatically initiate your next audit. So for initial audits, for your first 2 audits, your first initial and re-accredit, it's 12-month accreditations. After that, if you're doing really well, you can enter the merit program and eventually go to 18-month accreditation status and then up to 24-month accreditation status. But once you schedule that first audit and go through the process, eAudit.net automatically puts you down in the next quarter where you're supposed to be eligible for your next audit, and they'll start working on getting you your next audit dates. So you don't have to worry about trying to reschedule again. I think I'm doing good on time. So I wanted to go over a little bit about Nadcap statistics with you guys, so you guys see, you know, what the program is and how global it is. Right now, we have a little over 8,000 accreditations globally with the special processes or the commodities there. As I said earlier, the 3 biggest groups, chem processing with almost 1,500 there. You have heat treating with about 1,200 down there. I don't think ASA was one of our newer groups within the last 3 years. You know, currently they're at about 24 accreditations. Let's see here. Non-destructive testing is almost at 2,000. That technically was the very first commodity made whenever the Nadcap program was established in 1990. M&I, another newer group there at 170, and that number is growing every other month. I look at that and they're constantly getting new suppliers in and new audits in for that commodity. When we look globally again, we have accredited suppliers across 51 countries and locations. Again, primarily in the United States, then you're going to see high numbers in the European sector, and then we're getting more and more momentum over in the Asia sector. Just to give you guys an idea of that. When we talk about South Carolina companies, right now we have 54 Nadcap accreditations in South Carolina alone. You can take a look at the spread of companies there. Again, heat treat with 13, chem processing with 5, non-destruction testing with 13, the three big ones. That's typically what I would expect. And to close it up, I just want to talk a little about some resources. If you are interested in this as an initial person coming in or as a current NatCap accredited supplier, these are the 4 top resources I can think of. Obviously, eAudit.net, I've talked a bunch about it right now. It's a digital platform, which is home for everything. Make sure you get in there, you take a look at it, you get to those handbooks, those audit criteria. It can be a bit daunting, so I always say if you have questions, the best thing to do is call and ask or send an email. We have the Supplier Support Committee, otherwise known as the SSC within the NatCap program. It's actually a committee that the NMC has oversight of, and it's composed of accredited suppliers, and it's the voice of the supplier in the program. What they do is they make sure the NatCap program is meeting the supplier's needs as well, and that it's not, I guess, I don't know, it helps them work within the program. They have a great mentoring program. They have welcome packs. They have, getting to know NatCap and how to work in eAudit.net. They have business development packs that say, okay, you have an accreditation. How can I help leverage this to get some more business? They have a lot of good material. When I talk to new suppliers, I always try to get them connected with the NatCap SSC because they're great at helping people get into the program and work within eAudit.net. I will tell you, eAudit.net can get a little bit confusing, so it's great to have a committee like that to help support that. PRI has a training business as well, and they offer quality-related training and technical stuff. Typically, it's on quality, RCCA, NatCap audit criteria review, audit prep, very special processes. So if you're new to the program, if you're unsure, I always recommend taking a look at the programs that they have and some of the classes they teach. It's good material. The NatCap staff engineers and the special processors here, we do help them a lot with their material to make sure it's developed and it's meeting the needs. So when an audit criteria is changed or revised, we work with them to make sure that their training is up to date. Generally, the people teaching their classes are approved NatCap auditors too. So there's a lot of great experience there with that. And one of the other biggest, and I think most unutilized resources are the PRI staff. Excuse me. When you log into eAudit.net in the upper right corner, there's a contact us there. When you select that, you're going to get a whole list of email addresses, phone numbers. Matter of fact, my name is one of the first ones since my last name is Aiken. So I get a lot of phone calls and emails. And when I go out to these speaking events and talk with suppliers on these events, one of the most frequent questions I get back to them is, I didn't know I could call and talk to you. I didn't know I could ask you about that. So the PRI staff can help you with the NatCap program. If you don't understand an audit requirement or you don't understand a program requirement, reach out to one of us and ask us a question. This is what we're here for. We can't consult. We can't tell you how to meet the requirements, but we can explain to you what the requirement is and give you direction on meeting it and the training material for it. I think it is very highly underutilized myself, but it's a great resource. Don't be afraid to reach out to a staff member and ask questions. And the other thing that I didn't put on here are those meetings that we have 3 times a year. As this is South Carolina, I will tell you that every October we meet in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Our main office is right above there. But we meet there every October in person. And like I said, 1,600 people or so will be meeting there October of this year. If you're serious about the program, I highly recommend come to that meeting. It's over the course of a week. PRI training offers very discounted classes there. You can meet myself, the other staff engineers, and the other subscriber members that are there. That's really where they talk about the audit criteria and talk about a lot of what's going on currently and making sure the program stays current. So, and I think that's about it. I hope I didn't go too fast for you all. It's a lot of information there. Questions here, but feel free to contact me. My email address was there. If you go into eAudit.net, my name is the very first one. I'm happy to answer any questions or at least point you in the right direction.
Thanks, Ian. Or sorry, Ethan.
Not a problem.
Thanks, Ethan. We don't have any questions in the chat box, but just open it up for a couple minutes if anybody has anything.
if you've completed the AS 9100, how much does that help you toward Nadcap?
So in order to get Nadcap accreditation, you have to have a valid quality system. So typically you would need 9100 accreditation. And I think it helps you immensely. I mean, it's a quality audit. The Nadcap is a critical process or special process audit. So making sure that you have those high-level processes in place, those procedures, the calibration, the management control, you have your KPIs, which are really monitoring your processes. When the Nadcap audits come in, they're looking at those manufacturing processes more closely. I wish I had a great slide about it, of how a 9100 audit and the Nadcap audit and how they kind of correlate with each other and what the 9100 audit covers compared to Nadcap. Nadcap is really digging into the details. So if you notice, we have a first article inspection group right now. And if you look at 9100, I believe it's section 9-ish or 8-ish, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it talks about the first article process and recommends a process, involving 9102. So when it comes to a 9100 audit, they're going to look to see if that process is in place. Do you have a first article inspection process in place? What the first article inspection group within Nadcap is doing is it's taking those actual first article inspection reports, those FAIRs, and looking at it to make sure that the process you have defined, you're following it, and you're completing those reports properly. So it's a deep dive in, if that makes sense.
Terrific, thank you.
No, not a problem. I don't know, I like to talk a lot and I like to help people out. I want to see people succeed when it comes to Nadcap audits or any audits, to be honest with you. So if you have questions, again, feel free to contact me.